So, Brian, tell me one of your favorite things about the history of the internet.
One of my favorite things. Um, so I actually like the fact that it's so accidental. You know, I've talked about 150 different people now, and there's engineers, there's founders of companies, there's scientists, there's that. What I like about it, first of all, the internet is recent history. Obviously, a lot of people say to me, I can't believe that is history, and I say, well, we're coming up on I believe it's 50 years of the internet, 30 years of the web, and Facebook is 10 years old, Google's going to be 20 years old next year. So this is history, but it's so recent that you can still feel the fact that people were making it up as they went along. When someone does the history of like the founding fathers or something like 200 years ago, it's so steeped in history that the stories are all, well, this inevitably led to that, and this happened because that person was a genius and sussed this out. But when you talk to people and you collect oral histories of people that did history 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you can still capture yeah, we had no idea what we were doing. No, we just stumbled on that idea. I can't believe it worked, and to me, like, that's more vibrant history than what you would call a hagiography. Just this great man did this. I like history where it's people fumbling around in the dark and making it almost by accident.
That's awesome. I love that. And the thing that's so cool about your show is because it is, recent history, in some cases, current history. I just listened to an episode you dropped, I think pretty recently with Christine Warren on SoundCloud, right? And that's just
that's happening right now.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so that's what I love about what you're doing, whether it's sort of going back and looking at Netscape or the very origin of the internet itself, of course, and all the various stages along the way. And then you also do shit that's happening right now. And so I think for me as a fan, if it was just what happened in 1987, that would be cool for a while, but it might get old, right? And so the fact that you kind of interstitial what you're up to, I think is also very cool.
I mean, there's two methods to my madness. One is that I'm not very organized.
This wasn't necessarily an evil plan. Was this a little bit of happenstance too here, Brian?
I mean, so it could be, I'm doing something because all of a sudden I got interested in it and went down a rabbit hole, right? And so, yeah, the podcast is not very chronological at all. The book will be, but the podcast is not. But then the other thing is that, I'm a one-man band. Like, I don't have any bookers or a personal assistant to track down people. Like, so the episodes I do are when I can get somebody, so I'm going to record an episode hopefully tomorrow with the first person from Facebook that I've been able to speak to. And it just fell in my lap. So it's not that I, waited to have Facebook because, it was chronological or whatever. It's just, this is the first guy that said yes to, hey, do you want to come talk about the early days of Facebook?
Well, and I don't know. Have you ever said that explicitly on your show? I can't remember.
I'm that I'm also feeling around in the dark.
Yeah, that you are one of your subjects, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. From the very beginning, I mean, I don't know if you want me to go into this or not, but like,
I do.
this whole project started that I wanted to write a book. Books have been written about the birth of the internet back in the late 60s with ARPANET and Tim Berners-Lee in the early 90s, starting the web. But so I'm a startup guy. I've done 3 web companies in my career, and it sort of always annoyed me, maybe for ego reasons, that no one had done a book of like the last 20 years. There's been books about Google or books about Amazon or this person, that person. But, I was always like, why isn't there just a comprehensive book of A led to B led to C? It's not any great insight, but I thought it would be valuable. And so like every company I've ever started, the thought was, that's a good idea. Somebody's going to do it someday. Why don't I do it? So
yeah, why not me, right?
Right. So originally, this was 4 years ago now. My wife was pregnant. I was going to be the stay-at-home dad, and so I thought, okay, that'll be a fun little project to do to keep my adult juices flowing while I'm trying to be Mr. Mom at home here. And the problem is that I am a web guy. I am an entrepreneur, and so but specifically a web entrepreneur. So I'm used to having an idea and being able to throw it up there and get immediate feedback, right? And the process of writing a book is you sit in a room for 2 or 3 years, and eventually people can see what you got.
It's absolutely crazy. And have your book's coming out soon or next year? Is that right? Soonish.
I just turned in the manuscript last week, but I'm learning.
Congratulations.
I'm learning it's going to be a year-long process.
And do you have an agent as well as a publisher, Brian?
Yeah. I have an agent. The publisher is Norton. The subsidiary is LiveRight.
Yeah.
And my agent's Kevin O'Connor. And actually, we can go into this too. I don't know if would the book business be interesting to your audience at all?
We can chase any zebra down any rabbit hole we want, Brian. And I'm curious. I want to compare your experience to mine in being an author because I'm fascinated by it.
Well, I knew nothing about it. Like, again,
as did I.
I come from, I've pitched to VCs before. I've written business plans. I'd never written a book proposal. I didn't know that you can get a book published. You can self-publish. You can, but like if you want to get with the big five, as they say, or whatever, if you want a real big time publishing house behind you, they're not going to look at you until you have an agent, and a reputable agent, and most likely, at least in this country, an agent in New York. So that was a surprise.
I hate to interrupt you, Brian, but from what you heard, and you've been through it a little more recently than me. Play Bigger came out a year ago, so I was in this cycle. Let's call it. I think it was 3 years ago, if memory's right. So, your interpretation is that everything you just said is still very much the case, in spite of self-publishing, in spite of the social media, in spite of all that.
Listen, I am not saying at all that there is not a vibrant, self-publishing. You can do it all on Kindle now. You don't ever have to actually print a physical copy. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. I'm saying if you want to go the route of, I'd like to see my book in the airport bookstores. That sort of thing. Like,
I got to tell you, by the way, the day that Play Bigger was in SFO, that was a bigger day to me in a lot of ways than the day when Play Bigger came out.
I've said that
because we asked our publisher, like, hey, how come it's not in the airport bookstore at the time when we first came out? And she said, listen, you're not there yet. You gotta earn your place. Only the best books, only the hot books make it there. And so, we made it there roughly rough 9 months after the launch.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of ways, that felt like more of an achievement than just launching the book, because when you're a business book sitting at an airport, you fucking
you've reached your audience.
Yeah.
That's funny that you say that, because I've literally been saying that from day one. that's my goal, is to see it in an airport one day.
Yeah. Well, you're going to get there for sure, Brian. You're going to write I know you handed in a killer manuscript. I know. I've listened to enough of your shows to know.
Well, yeah. And so that's the other interesting thing, is that, so I could have sold it early on if I had, this is not to disparage like Malcolm Gladwell or anything but a lot of publishers wanted to like Malcolm Gladwell it, by which I mean, pick one thesis and wrap the history of the internet around it, or pick 4 people, pick Zuckerberg, pick Andreessen, pick, the Google guys, and just wrap the whole history around their 4 stories or whatever. And I stuck to my guns and I said, no, like, I don't want to write that book, A, but B, I think that to me, the value of this book is if you just do it as a straight history. What is the history that I'm telling? It is the last 20 years when technology infiltrated every second of our life, right? So to me, that's why I said all those years ago, I can't believe this book hasn't been written, because is there a more profound transformational thing over the last 25 years, then the internet, then technology, then having a supercomputer in your pocket. Like, so the fact that that hasn't been examined in a
Yeah,
comprehensive
and just to underscore your point, I can't. Shit, I wish I could remember who, because I always like to give credit where credit is due for ideas. So I apologize, but I either read or heard recently on a podcast. You know, I, like you, consume a lot of stuff, so sometimes you forget where it
Mhm.
comes from. Somebody said the cloud is the last platform.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, what could you imagine next? I don't
Well,
know whether that's right or not, but it was an interesting thesis, I thought.
I mean that's an entirely that's another rabbit hole entirely, because you know, the VCs want it to be things like AR and VR, but then they also want it to be AI, and so then if you get into artificial intelligence becoming an actual real platform, then there is no platform. Then it's just asking a computer to do something for you. You know,
Yeah.
make me dinner. You know, and so then you get into a whole thing of, then are we approaching an economic singularity where no one has jobs anymore because the robots can do it all? You know, so in a
So
way,
we
what you
become a robot-run
you're right.
socialistic paradise.
In which case, my book would become the history of the very ending of
uh,
classical economics as we understand it.
well, and